The gun wasn't supposed to be loaded. That's what Clara Hayes told herself as she stared down the barrel, her pulse hammering against her ribs. Across the polished mahogany desk, Adrian Voss, her boss, her obsession, her doom, didn't flinch. His gray eyes held hers with the kind of cold certainty that had built empires and buried enemies. "You won't pull that trigger," he said softly. She hated that he was right. This is a story about power, obsession, and the thin line between control and surrender. Stay with me until the end. Hit like and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The city sprawled beneath the 42nd floor like a kingdom of glass and steel, its lights flickering in the twilight like stars drowning in smog. Clara Hayes stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of Voss Enterprises, her reflection sharp against the darkening sky. Dark hair pulled into a severe bun, charcoal suit tailored to perfection, heels that clicked like warning shots on marble. She looked every inch the efficient executive assistant, controlled, unshakable. It was a lie. Behind her, the door to Adrian Voss's private office stood ajar. Inside, the man himself sat reviewing documents with the kind of focused intensity that made grown men sweat. Clara had worked for him for 18 months, and in that time she'd learned 3 fundamental truths. 1. Adrian Voss was not just a businessman. The legitimate holdings, real estate, tech investments, venture capital, were a beautiful facade over something far darker. 2. He was the most dangerous man she'd ever met. 3. She couldn't stay away from him. Clara. His voice cut through her thoughts like a blade through silk, smooth, commanding, impossible to ignore. She turned from the window, composing her features into professional neutrality. "Yes, Mr. Voss?" He didn't look up from the contract he was reading, fountain pen poised above the signature line. "The Dimitrov meeting. Did you confirm?" "Thursday at 8. Neutral ground as requested. The restaurant you specified." She moved toward his desk, iPad in hand. "Security is arranged. Victor wants to bring 4 men. You're bringing 6. Now he looked up. Adrian Voss was 42, though he wore it like armor rather than age. Dark hair touched with silver at the temples, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass. He dressed in suits that cost more than most people's cars, each one perfectly tailored to his lean, powerful frame. But it was his eyes that made people nervous, gray as winter storms, missing nothing, revealing nothing, except when he looked at Clara. Then sometimes she saw something shift beneath that glacial surface, something hungry and tightly leashed. 6 seems excessive, he said mildly. Clara arched an eyebrow. "Victor Dimitrov tried to have you killed 6 months ago. I'd say 6 is conservative." The corner of his mouth lifted, barely, but enough. "You're learning. I've had an excellent teacher in paranoia." "Caution," he corrected, setting down his pen. "Paranoia is fear without evidence. Caution is intelligence applied to probability." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with that unnerving intensity. "You're not afraid of me, are you, Clara? It was a test. Everything with Adrian was a test." "Should I be?" "Most people are." "I'm not most people." "No," he agreed softly. "You're not." The air between them thickened, charged with something Clara refused to name. She'd felt it from the beginning, that electric awareness, the way her body responded to his proximity like a compass finding north. It was dangerous, stupid, absolutely forbidden. She was his employee. He was her boss. He was also a man who controlled half the underground power structure in the city, whose enemies disappeared without trace, whose word was law in circles that operated beyond the reach of courts and badges. Clara had figured it out 3 months into the job. The late-night meetings with men who carried themselves like soldiers, the coded phone calls, the way certain names made people go pale. She'd been terrified at first, had almost quit, but she'd stayed. And somewhere along the way, terror had transformed into something far more complicated. "The Blackwood report," Adrian said, breaking the moment. "Is it ready?" Clara blinked, pulling herself back to professional ground. "On your desk, 3rd folder from the left. The discrepancies you suspected were there. Someone's been skimming for 6 months." His expression didn't change, but his fingers drummed once against the armrest, a tell she'd learned to recognize. Someone was about to have a very bad day. "Name?" "Martin Chen, VP of Operations. I cross-referenced the accounts like you showed me. She paused. What will you do? What do you think I should do? Another test. Clara considered carefully. In the legitimate business world, you'd fire him, possibly prosecute. In Adrian's world, the rules were different. Make an example, she said quietly, but not permanent. Chen has family, a wife, 2 kids. He's desperate, not disloyal. Scare him badly enough that he never tries it again and that everyone else sees the consequences. Adrian studied her for a long moment, something like approval flickering across his features. You have good instincts. I watch you. I know. His voice dropped half an octave. I watch you too. The confession hung between them like a loaded gun. Clara's heart kicked against her ribs, but she held his gaze, refusing to look away first. The intercom buzzed, shattering the tension. Mr. Voss? His secretary's voice came through, carefully neutral. Mr. Castellano is here for your 5 o'clock. Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Send him in. Clara, stay. She moved to the side of the room, her usual position during meetings, close enough to take notes, far enough to be unobtrusive. But when Marco Castellano walked through the door, she wished Adrian had dismissed her instead. Castellano was old guard Mafia, a bull of a man in his 60s with silver hair and eyes like chips of coal. He commanded respect through reputation and brutality, and he looked at Clara the way men like him always looked at women, as if assessing value and finding it purely decorative. Voss. He didn't offer his hand. We need to talk about the waterfront situation. Marco. Adrian gestured to the chair across from his desk but didn't rise. A subtle power play. This was his territory. I was under the impression we'd reached an agreement. Agreements change. Castellano sat heavily, ignoring Clara entirely. My nephew thinks he can do better with the Koreans. He's young, ambitious. I need you to convince him otherwise. Convince him how? However you see fit. Just keep your hands clean. The boy's family. Clara's pen moved across her notepad in smooth shorthand, recording every word. This was part of her job now, documenting conversations that would never see a courtroom, tracking agreements that existed only in honor and threat. Adrian was quiet for a moment, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. The waterfront represents 30% of our combined revenue stream. If your nephew disrupts that, we both lose. But if I intervene, it looks like weakness on your part, like you can't control your own blood. Castellano's face darkened. Watch yourself, boy. I'm not a boy, Marco, and I'm not your soldier. Adrian's voice remained perfectly calm, but Clara felt the room's temperature drop. If you want the Koreans handled, handle them yourself. If you want your nephew educated, educate him. Don't outsource your family problems to me and call it diplomacy. The older man's hands curled into fists on the armrests. For a terrible moment, Clara thought he might actually swing. Instead, he rose slowly, his bulk seeming to fill the room. You forget who paved the way for you in this city, Voss. Who gave you your first real connections? I forget nothing. Adrian stood as well, and though Castellano outweighed him by 50 pounds, there was no question who dominated the space. I remember every favor, every debt, every alliance. I also remember every betrayal, every threat, every attempt to put me in my place. He smiled, and it was the most dangerous expression Clara had ever seen. None of them worked out well for the people who tried. Castellano stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked out without another word. The door closed with a soft click. Clara let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Well, she said into the silence, that went well. Adrian's laugh was sharp and humorless. He'll be back with a better offer by tomorrow. Marco always gets reasonable after he's had time to think. And if he doesn't, then he'll learn the same lesson everyone else eventually learns. He moved to the bar cart in the corner, pouring 2 fingers of scotch into a crystal tumbler. That loyalty in this business isn't bought with history. It's earned with results and maintained with respect. He poured a second glass without asking and brought it to her. Clara accepted it, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The contact lasted a fraction of a second too long. You handled that well, Adrian said. Didn't flinch? Didn't react? Most people can't stay that calm when men like Castellano are in the room. I had you between us. You think I'd protect you? I know you would. The certainty in her own voice surprised her, but it was true. For all his danger, all his ruthlessness, Clara knew with absolute conviction that Adrian Voss would burn the world down before he let anyone harm her. The knowledge should have terrified her. Instead, it made her feel powerful. Dangerous assumption, Adrian murmured, moving closer. They stood by the window now, the city spreading out beneath them in the gathering dark. You don't really know me, Clara. You know what I allow you to see. I know enough. Do you? He was so close now she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke. Do you know how many people I've killed? Do you know what I've done to maintain this empire? The choices I've made, the lines I've crossed? Clara met his eyes steadily. I know you're not a good man. I've known that for months. And yet you stay. Yes. Why? It was the question she'd been asking herself for months. Why did she stay in a job that put her adjacent to murder and corruption? Why did she let herself get pulled deeper into Adrian's world, learning his business, understanding his strategies? Why did she lie awake at night thinking about him, fighting the pull that grew stronger every day? Because, she said finally, I've spent my whole life being careful, being safe, following the rules. And it got me exactly nowhere. You're dangerous, yes, but you're also the most honest person I've ever met. His eyebrows rose. Honest? You don't pretend to be something you're not. You don't hide behind social niceties or corporate doublespeak. You say exactly what you mean, and you do exactly what you say you'll do. She took a sip of scotch, feeling the burn slide down her throat. There's a purity in that, a kind of integrity, even if it's applied to terrible things. Adrian stared at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. You're extraordinary, do you know that? I'm practical. No. He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair that had escaped her bun. You're extraordinary, and you're wasted on me. That's not your decision to make, isn't it? I'm your employer, Clara. The power dynamic is exactly what I choose it to be. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them to mere inches. Her heart was hammering, but her voice was steady. I'm not some naive girl who wandered into your orbit by accident. I know what you are. I know what this is. And I'm still here. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The air crackled with tension so thick Clara could taste it. She could see the war in Adrian's eyes, desire battling control, want fighting discipline. Control won. He stepped back, putting professional distance between them. You should go home. It's late. The dismissal stung more than it should have. Clara nodded curtly, setting down her glass. Of course. I'll see you tomorrow. She was halfway to the door when he spoke again. Clara. She turned. Be careful out there. The city's not safe after dark. I've lived here for 5 years, Adrian. I can handle myself. Can you? Something flickered across his face, concern or perhaps possession. Humor me. Text when you get home. It was the first time he'd ever asked her to do that. The first time he'd shown explicit concern for her safety outside the office. Clara felt something warm and dangerous bloom in her chest. All right. She left before she could do something stupid like walk back to him. Well, the elevator ride down 42 floors gave her time to breathe, to rebuild the walls that Adrian's proximity always seemed to erode. By the time she reached the parking garage, Clara had almost convinced herself she was fine. Then she saw him. James Worthington stood beside her car, hands in the pockets of an expensive overcoat, smile easy and charming. He was handsome in that generic way wealthy men often were. Good haircut, better watch, confidence that came from never being told no. They'd met at a charity gala 3 weeks ago. He'd asked her to dinner twice. She'd politely declined both times. Clara, what a coincidence. James. She kept her voice neutral, keys already in hand. This is a private garage. How did you get in? Oh, I was meeting someone in the building, saw your car and thought I'd wait. He gestured to her sleek black sedan. You never responded to my last text. I've been busy. Too busy for dinner? Come on, Clara. One meal. What's the harm? There was something in his persistence that set off alarm bells. She'd dealt with pushy men before, but James had an edge to him, a calculation beneath the charm. I appreciate the interest, but I'm not looking to date right now. All work and no play? He stepped closer, invading her space. You can't spend every evening working for Adrian Voss. The man's a machine, not a lover. The way he said Adrian's name made Clara's instincts scream. How do you know who I work for? James's smile widened. Everyone knows Adrian Voss, and everyone knows his beautiful assistant. You've been photographed together at a dozen events. People talk. Then people should find better hobbies. She moved a step around him, but he shifted, blocking her path. One dinner, Clara. Friday night. There's this new place in the Harbor District. No. Her voice hardened. I've said no 3 times now. Stop asking. His expression changed, the charm sliding away to reveal something colder underneath. You're making a mistake. The only mistake would be saying yes. Now move. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't. Then his phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, his jaw tightening. Whatever he read there changed his mind. Fine, but you'll regret this, Clara, sooner than you think. He walked away, leaving her standing by her car with her heart racing and her instincts screaming danger. Clara sat in the driver's seat for a full minute before her hand stopped shaking enough to start the engine. She should tell someone, should report the encounter, should tell Adrian. But what would she say? That a man had asked her to dinner and she'd felt threatened? Adrian would probably have James disappeared by morning, and as much as the man had unnerved her, that seemed extreme. No, she could handle this herself. She drove home through darkening streets, her mind replaying the encounter. There was something wrong about James Worthington, something that went beyond ordinary persistence. The way he'd mentioned Adrian, the timing of his appearance, that final threat. Her phone rang through the car's speakers, making her jump. Adrian's name lit up the screen. She almost didn't answer. Then, remembering his request that she text, she accepted the call. I'm fine, she said before he could ask. Almost home. Good. There was a pause. I'm sending a car for you tomorrow. Marcus will pick you up at 7:30. Marcus was Adrian's head of security. Ex-military, built like a tank, utterly loyal. That's not necessary. It's not a request, Clara. Adrian, something feels wrong tonight. His voice was tight, controlled. Call it instinct. Call it paranoia. I don't care. Marcus drives you until I say otherwise. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to insist on her independence. But the memory of James Worthington's cold smile stopped her. All right, she said quietly. Thank you. Another pause, longer this time. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. He hung up before she could respond. Clara pulled into her apartment building's garage, killed the engine, and sat in the silence. Her phone buzzed with a text. James Worthington, you really should have said yes. She deleted it without responding and made her way upstairs. Her apartment was small but carefully curated. Modern furniture, minimal decoration, everything in its place. It had always felt like a sanctuary before. Tonight, it felt empty. Clara poured herself a glass of wine and stood at her own window, looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, Adrian was in his penthouse, probably still working. Did he look out at the same skyline and think of her? Did he lie awake fighting the same pull that kept her tethered to his orbit? Her phone buzzed again. She almost ignored it, expecting another message from James, but it was Adrian. Adrian, did you make it home safely? Such a simple question, such dangerous concern. Clara, yes, locked in for the night. Adrian, good, sleep well. She stared at the message for a long time before typing her response. Clara, you too. But she knew he wouldn't. Adrian Voss didn't sleep well. She'd learned that from months of early morning calls, late night emails, the shadows under his eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. He was a man perpetually at war, with his enemies, with his allies, with himself. And increasingly, she was becoming part of that battlefield. The week that followed had a strange, tense quality, like the air before a thunderstorm. Adrian was more protective than usual, keeping her close during meetings, sending Marcus to drive her everywhere. She caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, his expression unreadable. The Dimitrov meeting went smoothly, if you could call 2 crime lords negotiating territory distribution over expensive wine smooth. Clara took notes, said nothing, and ignored Viktor Dimitrov's wandering eyes. Adrian noticed anyway. She could tell by the way his hand tightened on his glass, the barely perceptible edge in his voice when he spoke. Afterward, in the car, he'd been quiet. "You handled that well," he finally said. "I sat and wrote things down. Not exactly challenging." "You didn't react when Dimitrov made that comment about your dress." So he had noticed. "Because it wasn't worth reacting to." I wanted to put a bullet in his eye. Clara turned to look at him in the dimness of the back seat. Marcus drove in focused silence up front, eyes on the road, giving them the illusion of privacy. "But you didn't," she said softly. "No, because you're right. It wasn't worth it, and because I'm trying very hard not to be the monster you should be afraid of." "I told you, I'm not afraid of you." "Then you're a fool." But he said it gently, almost sadly. "Everything I touch turns dark, Clara. Everyone who gets close to me ends up damaged or dead. You should run from me as fast as you can." "Is that what you want? For me to run?" He was quiet for a long moment. "No, that's the problem. What I want and what's best for you are two very different things." The car pulled up to her building. Marcus got out to open her door, his eyes scanning the street with professional paranoia. Clara gathered her bag but didn't move. "Adrian?" He looked at her, and in the shadows of the car, his eyes were almost black. "I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting from reality. I know what you are. I'm choosing to stay anyway. Stop trying to make that choice for me." She got out before he could respond. That night she lay awake thinking about his words. "Everything I touch turns dark." Was she turning dark too? 6 months ago, she would have been horrified by the things she now documented without flinching. 6 months ago, she would have run from a man like Adrian Voss. Now she was running toward him. Friday arrived with unseasonable warmth, the city sweating under an unexpected heat wave. Clara dressed in a light gray dress, professional but slightly less severe than her usual armor. She told herself it had nothing to do with the way Adrian's eyes tracked her movements lately. She was reviewing contracts in her office when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, expecting Adrian. It was James Worthington. "James, still thinking about you. Last chance for dinner. Tonight, 8 p.m., Harbor District. I promise it will be illuminating." Clara's finger hovered over the delete button. Then she paused. Illuminating. What an odd word choice. She thought about his appearance in the garage, his knowledge of her schedule, his persistence, the way he'd name-dropped Adrian. That final threat. This wasn't romance. This was something else. She should ignore it, should tell Adrian. Clara. "Fine. One dinner. Text me the address." She sent it before she could overthink it. If James Worthington was digging into her life, into Adrian's business, she wanted to know why. And she wasn't going to hide behind Adrian's protection to find out. Her phone rang immediately. "Adrian." "Yes?" "Conference room. 5 minutes. We have a problem." He hung up without elaborating. Clara found him standing at the head of the table, Marcus beside him, both men radiating tension. On the screen behind them was a photograph, a shipping container, its doors open to reveal crates of weapons. "This arrived at our Port Authority contact an hour ago," Adrian said without preamble. "It's registered to one of our shell companies. We didn't ship it." Clara's mind raced. "Someone's framing you." "Obviously. The question is who and why." He pulled up another image. Manifest, shipping documents, all bearing forged signatures. "These are good, very good. Professional level forgery." "The Castellanos?" Marcus suggested. "Marco's old school. This is too sophisticated for his people." Adrian's jaw tightened. "This is someone who understands our operations from the inside. Someone who knows our procedures, our companies, our vulnerabilities." Clara thought of James Worthington's cold smile, his pointed questions, his reference to the Harbor District. Harbor District, where he wanted to meet for dinner. "Adrian," she said slowly, "I think I might know something." Both men turned to her. She explained about James, the persistent contact, the knowledge he shouldn't have, the strange invitation. He mentioned the Harbor District specifically, said dinner would be illuminating. Adrian's expression went very still. "When?" "Tonight, 8 o'clock. He just texted me." "You're not going?" "Actually," Clara said carefully, "I think I should. If he's involved in this, meeting him might give us information." "Absolutely not." Adrian's voice went hard as steel. This is exactly the kind of trap someone sets when they want leverage. They take you. They use you against me, and suddenly I'm negotiating with a knife at your throat. Then send backup. Have Marcus and his team close by. But if I don't show, we lose the chance to find out who's behind this. No. Adrian, I said no, Clara. He stepped closer, towering over her. You're not bait. You're not a pawn. And you're sure as hell not walking into an obvious trap to prove you're brave. This isn't about proving anything. This is about protecting what you've built. I don't care. The words came out low and fierce. I don't care about the business, about the frame job, about any of it if the cost is putting you in danger. Do you understand me? I don't care. The room fell silent. Marcus suddenly found the floor very interesting. Clara stared at Adrian, her heart hammering. He was breathing hard, his control finally cracking, and she could see everything he'd been hiding in his eyes. The fear, the possession, the desperate need he'd been fighting for months. Well, she said quietly, that's honest. I'm done pretending. He reached out, his hand cupping her face with unexpected gentleness. I'm done lying to myself about what you are to me. And I'm absolutely done letting you risk yourself for my sake. Then what am I to you, Adrian? His thumb brushed her cheekbone. Mine. You're mine, Clara, even though you shouldn't be. Even though I don't deserve you. Even though this will probably destroy us both. You're mine, and I'm not letting anyone take you. Clara should have been frightened, should have been disturbed by the raw possession in his voice, the claim he had no right to make. Instead, she felt like she'd been waiting her whole life to hear those words. Then come with me, she said. Tonight. Let me meet James, see what he wants. But you'll be there. We'll handle it together. Clara, you just said I'm yours. Prove it. Trust me. Be my partner in this, not just my protector. Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. Together, he agreed, but on my terms. We do this my way. Deal. Marcus cleared his throat. I'll assemble a team. Full surveillance, multiple extraction points, close-range support. She won't be out of our sight for a second. Good. Adrian's hand dropped from Clara's face, but his eyes never left hers. And Marcus, if anything happens to her, there won't be enough left of Worthington to fill a matchbox. To be continued, the restaurant James had chosen was called Meridian, a sleek waterfront establishment where the city's elite pretended civility over $30 cocktails and $100 entrees. Clara had been there once before, for a business dinner with Adrian and a tech investor who'd spent the entire meal trying not to stare at the woman he'd brought who was young enough to be his granddaughter. She arrived at 7:50, deliberately early, wanting to control at least some element of the evening. The hostess led her to a corner table with a view of the harbor, where boats bobbed in their slips and the water reflected city lights like scattered diamonds. James was already there. He rose as she approached, that familiar smile fixed in place like a mask. Clara, you came. I wasn't sure you would. You were very persistent. She let him pull out her chair, noting the expensive suit, the designer watch, the cologne that probably cost more than her monthly car payment. Everything about James Worthington screamed money and privilege. Everything except his eyes, which were calculating and cold. Can I order you a drink? The bartender here makes an excellent Manhattan. Just water for now? He signaled the waiter anyway, ordering wine she didn't want. Clara let it happen, playing the role of the polite date while her mind cataloged every detail. 2 exits, main entrance and kitchen, windows facing the harbor, security camera in the northeast corner, 3 couples at nearby tables, all absorbed in their own conversations. And somewhere in the shadows outside, Adrian was watching. The thought steadied her. So, James said once the wine arrived, tell me about yourself. We've run into each other at several events, but I realize I know very little about Clara Hayes. There's not much to tell. I work, I read, I exist. She took a careful sip of wine she had no intention of finishing. What about you? What does James Worthington do when he's not ambushing women in parking garages? His smile tightened. I'm in acquisitions, identifying valuable assets, determining their worth, negotiating terms. Assets like what? Companies, properties, information. He leaned forward slightly. Sometimes people. Clara's pulse kicked up, but she kept her expression neutral. That sounds ominous. Does it? I think of it as opportunity creation. Finding connections between parties who could benefit from knowing each other. Facilitating conversations that might not otherwise happen. You're a middleman. I prefer broker. It sounds more sophisticated. He topped off her wine glass despite the fact she'd barely touched it. Like right now. I'm brokering a conversation between you and some people who are very interested in your employer. There it was, the trap springing shut. Clara set down her glass carefully. And what makes you think I'd betray Adrian Voss? Betray is such a harsh word. I'm simply offering you an opportunity to protect yourself. Adrian has enemies, Clara, powerful ones. They're closing in, and when they move, everyone close to him will be caught in the crossfire, unless you're smart enough to step aside first. By doing what exactly? Just information. His schedule, his contacts, the location of certain meetings, nothing that would directly harm him. But James's smile was all reasonable persuasion now. Think of it as insurance. You provide what we need, and when things go bad, and they will go bad, you walk away clean, maybe even compensated for your trouble. Clara let silence stretch between them, as if considering. In her peripheral vision, she caught movement by the bar. Marcus, dressed in casual clothes, nursing a beer and reading his phone like any other patron. Nearby, she knew, at least 3 more of Adrian's people were positioned. Who's we? She finally asked. Does it matter? People with resources. People who can protect you when Adrian can't. The Castellanos? James's expression flickered, surprise, quickly masked. Marco Castellano is a dinosaur clinging to relevance. This is bigger than his family squabbles. Then who? Someone who understands that the old ways are dying, that men like Voss think they can straddle 2 worlds, legitimate business and underground power, but eventually they have to choose. And when they're forced to choose, they become vulnerable. Claire's mind raced, processing implications. This wasn't just about framing Adrian for weapons smuggling. This was about forcing him into a corner where he'd have to show his hand publicly, where he'd have to choose between protecting his criminal empire and maintaining his legitimate facade. And when he chose, his enemies would be ready. What if I say no? She asked quietly. James's smile faded entirely. Then you're making a very dangerous mistake, the kind that gets people hurt. You seem like a smart woman, Clara, smart enough to recognize when you're in over your head, smart enough to take the lifeline being offered. Or what? You'll hurt me? Kill me? Of course not. That would be crude. No, we'll simply let nature take its course. Let you stay close to Adrian while everything collapses around him. And when the inevitable happens, when he's arrested or dead or running, you'll be buried in the rubble. Unless you make the smart choice now. Clara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against polished floor. I need to use the restroom. James rose as well, ever the gentleman. Of course. But Clara? Don't take too long, and don't try to leave. I'd hate for this evening to end unpleasantly. She walked toward the back of the restaurant on legs that felt steadier than they should. The ladies' room was empty, all gleaming marble and expensive fixtures. Clara locked herself in a stall and pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Clara, he's working for someone bigger than Castellano, trying to recruit me as an informant. This is about forcing Adrian into the open. Adrian, are you okay? Clara, yes, but he implied I can't leave. What do I do? The response came immediately. Adrian, Marcus is at the bar, 2 more men by the entrance. If you want out right now, say the word. Clara stared at the screen. The smart thing would be to walk out, let Adrian's people extract her, go home and pretend this never happened. But James had information they needed. He'd revealed connections, strategies, weaknesses in the conspiracy against Adrian, and he was arrogant enough to think she was frightened enough to cooperate. Clara, no, I'm going back out. Let's see what else he tells me. Adrian, Clara, trust me, like I'm trusting you. She flushed the toilet for appearance's sake, washed her hands, and studied herself in the mirror. Her reflection looked calm, composed, every inch the professional assistant. She looked like someone who could be intimidated into betrayal. Perfect. When she returned to the table, James was on his phone. He ended the call quickly as she sat. Everything all right? Fine. I just needed a moment to think. Clara picked up her wine glass, forcing herself to take a real sip this time. These people you work for. What happens if I agree? How does this work? Relief flooded James's features. It's simple. You'll be given a secure phone. When we need information, we text. You respond when you can. Nothing traceable, nothing that connects back to you. Just quiet cooperation. And the compensation? 50,000 now. Another 50 when we have what we need. Plus guaranteed immunity from whatever legal fallout comes Adrian's way. $100,000. Immunity. Freedom from consequences. For anyone else, it might have been tempting. What exactly do you need? Clara asked. Adrian's meeting with someone next week. Someone important. We need to know when and where. We need documentation of what's discussed. And we need you to make sure he's there, on time, without extra security. A setup. They were planning to hit Adrian at a meeting when he'd be vulnerable, exposed, and they wanted her to deliver him. What if he doesn't have a meeting scheduled next week? He will. You're going to suggest one. James slid a business card across the table. This man, Robert Chen. He's been trying to get a meeting with Adrian for months. Adrian's been avoiding him because Chen's companies are under federal investigation. But you're going to convince Adrian that Chen has information worth hearing, that the risk is worth it. Clara looked at the card. Robert Chen, CEO of Pacific Rim Investments. She recognized the name. One of dozens of business contacts Adrian had deliberately kept at arm's length because of their legal troubles. And if Adrian still says no? You're his assistant. You manage his calendar. Make it happen. James leaned back, confident now. One meeting, Clara. That's all we need. You set it up, you make sure he's there, and you walk away with enough money to start over anywhere you want, away from all this darkness. She pretended to consider, letting the silence build. Finally, she nodded slowly. I'll need that phone tonight, and the first payment transferred before I do anything. Already arranged. James pulled a small black phone from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. The payment will hit your account by midnight. Welcome to the winning side, Clara. She took the phone, feeling its weight in her palm like a lead brick. How do I know you'll keep your word? That you won't just disappear once you have what you need? Because we're professionals, and because if we burn you, you could go straight to Adrian with everything. Mutually assured destruction keeps everyone honest. Clara slipped the phone into her purse. I should go. Being seen with you too long might raise questions. Of course. But Clara? James reached across the table, his hand covering hers. His grip was slightly too tight, his smile slightly too wide. You made the right choice. The only choice. Adrian Voss is a dead man walking. At least now you won't die with him. She pulled her hand away and stood. I'll be in touch when I have information. I know you will. Clara walked out of Meridian on legs that trembled despite her best efforts to control them. The night air hit her face like a slap, cool and sharp after the restaurant's warmth. She made it 3 blocks before her knees buckled. Strong hands caught her. I've got you. Adrian pulled her into a doorway, away from streetlights and passing pedestrians. His arms came around her like steel bands, holding her against his chest while she shook. You did so well, he murmured into her hair. So damned brave. But it's over now. You're safe. He wanted me to set you up, to arrange a meeting so they could... The words tumbled out in a rush. Next week, with Robert Chen, he gave me a phone and promised money. And Adrian, they're planning something big, something that requires you to be in a specific place at a specific time. I know. Marcus recorded everything. His hand stroked down her back, steadying. We heard it all. You got us exactly what we needed. Clara pulled back enough to look up at him. In the shadows, his face was all hard angles and dangerous intent. What now? Now we use what you learned to set a trap of our own. They want to arrange a meeting? Fine. We'll give them one. But on our terms, our ground, with our people ready. His hand came up to cup her face. But first, I'm getting you somewhere safe. I'm not running, regrouping. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. Marcus is bringing the car around. We're going to my penthouse. You're staying there tonight where I can protect you properly. Adrian, that's not necessary. Yes, it is. Because James Worthington was right about one thing. I'm a dead man walking. And everyone close to me is in danger. But I'll be damned if I let them use you against me. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. Marcus was driving, his eyes scanning the street with professional paranoia. Adrian guided Clara into the back seat and slid in beside her. They drove in silence through the city, leaving the waterfront behind for the towers of downtown. Adrian's building was one of the tallest, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky like an accusation. The elevator required a key card for the penthouse level. Clara had been here once before, months ago, to drop off documents Adrian had forgotten at the office. She'd spent the entire visit trying not to imagine what it would be like to stay. Now, as the elevator doors opened directly into his private space, she was about to find out. The penthouse was exactly what she'd expected. Minimalist, masculine, expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of the city. Dark furniture, carefully chosen art, a kitchen that looked like it had never been used. Everything perfect and controlled and utterly impersonal, except for one wall. Clara moved toward it slowly, drawn by the unexpected intimacy of what she saw. Photographs carefully framed and arranged. Not the professional shots she'd expected, but personal ones. Adrian with people she recognized. Marcus, looking younger and laughing at something off camera. An older couple who had to be his parents. A teenage Adrian with a girl who shared his eyes, both of them making faces at the photographer. "My sister," Adrian said quietly behind her. "Emily. She died when I was 22, drunk driver." Clara turned. "I'm so sorry." It was a long time ago. But pain flickered across his face, old and never quite healed. She was the good one, the one who was going to do something meaningful with her life. Doctor, humanitarian, world changer. I was the screw-up, the one our parents worried about. And then she was gone, and I was the only one left to carry the family name. Is that why you built all this? To honor her? To prove I wasn't worthless, to show our parents their faith in me wasn't misplaced. He moved to the bar, poured 2 glasses of scotch. Instead, I became exactly what they feared, a criminal with a respectable veneer. Clara accepted the glass he offered. "You're more than that." "Am I?" He gestured to the view, the city spread out beneath them like a kingdom. "I control territory through violence and fear. I've killed people, Clara, ordered deaths, destroyed lives. The business empire, the philanthropy, the charity galas, it's all just window dressing over something rotten. Then why do you do it? Why not just be legitimate? You have the money, the connections. You could walk away from the criminal side tomorrow if you wanted." Adrian laughed, the sound bitter. "Could I? Once you're in this world, there's no walking away. The Castellanos, the Dimitrovs, the families and organizations I've dealt with, they don't give exit interviews. You're in until you're dead, or until someone kills you for trying to leave. But you wanted to. Once." It wasn't a question. Clara could see it in his eyes, in the way he looked at that photograph of his sister. "When Emily died, I promised myself I'd get out. Build something legitimate, something she'd be proud of. I was planning my exit strategy when Marcus found me." He took a long drink. Someone had put a hit on me. Professional job, already in motion. If Marcus hadn't warned me, I'd be dead. And I realized something. It didn't matter what I wanted. I was already too deep. The only choice was whether to be a victim or a survivor. "So you chose to survive." "I chose to win, to be so dangerous, so powerful that no one would dare come for me again. And it worked. For 20 years it worked. I built an empire, made myself untouchable." Until now, he agreed. "Because someone's found a weakness I didn't know I had." His eyes met hers, intensity burning in their depths. "You, Clara. You're the crack in my armor, the vulnerability I can't afford and can't give up." Clara set down her glass with a hand that wasn't quite steady. "I'm not weak, and I'm not helpless. I know. That's what makes this so dangerous. If you were weak, I could protect you by keeping you away. If you were helpless, I could lock you somewhere safe and know you'd stay put. But you're neither. You're brilliant and brave, and you insist on putting yourself in danger for my sake, and it's going to destroy me. Or save you. How do you figure that? Because for the first time in 20 years, you care about something more than survival and power. That's not weakness, Adrian. That's what makes you human." He stared at her for a long moment, then crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones with unexpected tenderness. "You should run from me," he said again, but this time it sounded like a prayer. "You should be terrified of what I am, what I'm capable of doing." "I know what you're capable of. I've watched you work for 18 months. I've seen you negotiate and manipulate and threaten. I've documented decisions that would send you to prison for life. And I'm still here." "Why?" "Because you're also the man who keeps a photo of his sister on his wall 20 years after her death. The man who sends money to Marcus's mother every month, even though Marcus doesn't know about it. The man who pays for his secretary's daughter's college tuition and pretends it's a company scholarship." She reached up, her hands covering his. "You think you're a monster, but monsters don't do those things." "I've killed people, Clara." "I know. I've ordered torture, executions, betrayals. I know. I'm going to hell if there is one, and I'm probably taking you with me. Then we'll go together." She pulled his hands down, holding them between them. "I'm not naive, Adrian. I'm not pretending you're secretly noble or that love redeems all sins. You are exactly what you say you are. And I'm choosing you anyway. Stop trying to make me afraid. Stop trying to push me away. It's not going to work." "It should. But it won't." For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Adrian pulled her against him, his mouth crashing down on hers with all the pent-up hunger and desperation of 18 months of denial. Clara kissed him back fiercely, her hands fisting in his jacket, her body arching into his like coming home. This wasn't gentle, wasn't tender. It was need and possession and the kind of desire that burned away everything except the moment. Adrian's hands were in her hair, at her waist, pulling her closer like he could absorb her into himself. Clara gave as good as she got, nails scraping against his scalp, teeth catching his lower lip. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she could see her own wild need reflected in his eyes. "Stay tonight," he said roughly. "Not because of danger, not because of protection. Stay because you want to." "I want to." "Clara," his voice was strained. "If you stay, if we do this, there's no going back. You'll be mine completely, and I'll be yours. In this world, that's a bond that can't be broken. That's a target on your back forever. Are you sure?" She answered by kissing him again, slower this time, but no less intense. Adrian groaned against her mouth and lifted her, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her toward the bedroom. They left a trail of discarded clothing, her jacket, his tie, her shoes. The bedroom was dark except for the city lights streaming through the windows, casting everything in silver and shadow. Clara would remember later in fragments, the feel of expensive sheets against her skin, the way Adrian whispered her name like a benediction, the moment when he paused to look at her as if memorizing every detail, the way he touched her with something approaching reverence despite the hunger driving them both. They came together like a storm finally breaking, all that tension and denial exploding into something raw and real and absolutely consuming. And when it was over, when they lay tangled together in the aftermath, Clara felt the fundamental shift in her universe. She'd crossed a line tonight, multiple lines, and there was no going back. Adrian's arm was heavy across her waist, his breathing evening out into sleep. Clara stared at the ceiling, her mind racing despite her body's exhaustion. Somewhere out there, James Worthington and his mysterious employers were planning Adrian's destruction. Somewhere, enemies were circling, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And she was lying in Adrian Voss's bed, bound to him now in ways that went beyond employment or loyalty. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, that black phone James had given her. Clara reached for it carefully, not wanting to wake Adrian. The message was simple. Unknown. Payment confirmed. "We'll be in touch with details about the Chen meeting. Remember what's at stake." She should show it to Adrian, should wake him and strategize their next move. Instead, she deleted the message and set the phone aside. Tomorrow would be soon enough for war planning. Tonight she just wanted this. The warmth of his body against hers, the quiet sound of his breathing, the illusion of safety in the darkness. Adrian stirred, pulling her closer in his sleep, and Clara let herself relax into his embrace. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. That was the promise they'd made tonight, even if they'd spoken it through touch rather than words. The city glittered beyond the windows, beautiful and deadly and utterly indifferent to the drama playing out in its towers. Clara closed her eyes and tried to sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new threats, new challenges, new impossible choices. But for now, in this moment, she had exactly what she wanted, and she was willing to burn the whole world down to keep it. Dawn came too quickly, spilling cold light across the bedroom floor. Clara woke to the sensation of being watched and found Adrian propped on one elbow beside her, his gray eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "How long have you been awake?" she asked, her voice rough with sleep. "A while." His fingers traced the line of her shoulder, the touch casual but possessive. "I don't sleep much, old habit." "From what? Always being ready for an attack?" "Something like that." He leaned down, brushing his lips across her forehead with unexpected tenderness. "Coffee?" "Please." She watched him rise, utterly unself-conscious in his nakedness, and disappear into the adjoining bathroom. A moment later, she heard the shower running. Clara lay there for a moment, processing the enormity of what had happened, then reached for her phone. 7 missed calls from her roommate, 3 texts asking if she was okay, and 1 new message on the black phone that made her stomach clench. Unknown, Thursday, 3 p.m., Warehouse District, Old Fisher Building. You'll arrange for Adrian to meet Chen there, alone. Confirm receipt. Thursday was 3 days away. Clara stared at the message, her mind racing. They were moving fast, pushing the timeline. That meant they were either very confident or very desperate. She needed to tell Adrian immediately, show him the message, let him start planning their countermove. But something held her back. If she showed him now, in this moment of intimacy, it would shatter the fragile peace between them. It would transform last night from connection into strategy, would make her wonder if he was holding her because he wanted to or because he needed to keep her close. She hated that the doubt was even there, creeping in like poison, but James Worthington's words echoed in her head. "You're an asset to him, a useful piece on the board." Clara deleted the message without responding and set the phone aside as Adrian emerged from the bathroom, a towel slung low around his hips. Water droplets traced paths down his chest, and she let herself be distracted by the sight of him, by the way he moved with predatory grace. "Your turn," he said, gesturing toward the shower. "I'll make breakfast." "You cook?" "I can manage eggs without burning down the building." "Probably." The smile he gave her was almost boyish, and Clara felt her heart twist. This was the man beneath the armor, the one who'd been buried under 20 years of survival and ruthlessness, the one he only showed her. She showered quickly, using his soap that smelled like cedar and smoke, wrapping herself in one of his dress shirts when she emerged because her clothes from last night were scattered somewhere between the living room and bedroom. The shirt fell to mid-thigh, and she caught sight of herself in the mirror, hair damp and wild, lips still slightly swollen from kissing, wearing her lover's clothes. She looked claimed. The thought should have bothered her. Instead, it sent heat curling through her belly. In the kitchen, Adrian had indeed managed eggs, along with toast and coffee that was strong enough to strip paint. He'd pulled on pants but remained shirtless, and Clara found it difficult to concentrate on breakfast when presented with that view. "We need to talk about next steps," he said, sliding a plate toward her. "James and his people are going to expect you to arrange that meeting. We need to decide how to play it." Clara took a sip of coffee to buy herself time. "What do you want to do?" "Give them what they want. Set up the meeting, make it look legitimate, but we control the location, the timing, the variables. Turn their trap into ours." "That's dangerous. Everything about this situation is dangerous, but if we're smart, we can use it to draw out whoever's really behind this. James is just a middleman. I want the actual threat." Clara pushed eggs around her plate. "And what's my role in all this?" Adrian's eyes sharpened. "What do you mean?" "I mean, am I still your assistant, your employee? Or am I something else now?" She gestured between them. "Because last night changed things, and I need to know where I stand." He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he set down his fork and reached across the table, taking her hand. "You're right. Last night changed everything. And I'm not going to insult you by pretending otherwise, or hiding behind professional boundaries that stopped meaning anything months ago." His thumb stroked across her knuckles. "You're mine, Clara. My partner. My equal. My—" He paused, searching for the right word. "My other half. In all of this. The business, the danger, the decisions. I'm not your boss anymore. I'm yours. Does that answer your question?" "It should have. But Clara thought about that black phone hidden in her purse, about the message she'd deleted, about the decision she'd made to keep it from him even temporarily. Partners didn't keep secrets. Adrian, his phone buzzed, vibrating across the granite countertop. He glanced at it and swore softly. Marcus, something's happened. He answered on speaker. Talk to me. We've got a problem. Marcus's voice was tight with controlled urgency. James Worthington is dead. Found him an hour ago in his apartment. Single gunshot to the head, staged to look like suicide. Clara's coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor in an explosion of porcelain and liquid. Adrian was at her side instantly, pulling her away from the wreckage, but she barely registered it. James was dead. Suicide? Adrian's voice was sharp. You said staged. Gun was in his right hand. Worthington was left-handed. Plus the angle's wrong. Powder burns don't match. Whoever did this wanted it to look self-inflicted but didn't do their homework. The people he was working for, Clara heard herself say, they killed him because he talked to me, because he revealed too much. Or because he failed to recruit you, Adrian said grimly. Either way, they're cleaning up loose ends. Marcus, I want full security protocols. No one gets near this building without being vetted. And find out everything you can about Worthington's connections, his finances, his communications from the past month. Already on it. But boss, there's more. The cops are going to want to talk to Clara. Restaurant staff confirmed she had dinner with Worthington last night. She might be the last person to see him alive besides the killer. Clara felt the world tilt slightly. Of course they'd want to talk to her. She'd walked into that restaurant in full view of cameras and witnesses, had sat across from a man who was now dead, They won't get near her, Adrian said flatly. We'll cooperate through lawyers. Clara doesn't talk to anyone without counsel present. Adrian, that looks suspicious, Clara protested. If I lawyer up immediately, I don't care how it looks. These people just killed their own operative to tie up loose ends. You think they won't try to tie up the woman he tried to recruit? He pulled out his phone, already dialing. I'm calling Richard Chen, best criminal defense attorney in the city. He'll handle the police. Clara watched him take control, making calls and issuing orders with calm efficiency. This was the Adrian Voss the world knew, decisive, powerful, several steps ahead of everyone else. But she could see the fear beneath the control, the way his free hand kept reaching for her as if to confirm she was still there. He was terrified. For her. The realization settled over her like a weight. Last night, in the heat of confession and desire, it had been easy to accept his declaration of possession, his claim that she was his. In the bright light of morning, with death creeping closer, the reality was more complicated. Adrian Voss didn't just want her. He needed her, and need made people vulnerable. I have to tell you something, she said once he'd finished his calls. The black phone James gave me. I got a message this morning. Instructions for the meeting with Robert Chen, Thursday afternoon, Warehouse District, Old Fisher Building. Adrian's expression went very still. When were you going to tell me this? I just did. You got the message hours ago. I can see the timestamp from here. He gestured to her purse where she'd left the phone visible on the counter. You were going to wait. Why? Clara met his eyes steadily. Because I wanted one morning where we were just us, not strategists planning the next move. Was that so wrong? In this situation, yes. His voice hardened. Clara, we don't have the luxury of pretending this is a normal relationship. People are trying to kill me. Now they've murdered someone who made contact with you. Every second counts. Every piece of information matters. You can't hold things back, not even for a few hours. I know that. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're still treating this like a game. Like you can dip your toes into my world when it's exciting and pull back when it gets real. Anger flared hot in Clara's chest. That's not fair. I walked into a trap last night for you. I played along with James's recruitment to get you intelligence. I've crossed every line there is, so don't you dare accuse me of not being all in. Then act like it. You want to be my partner? Fine. But partners don't keep secrets, not even small ones, not even for noble reasons. He turned away, hands braced against the counter. The moment you got that message, you should have woken me up. Instead, you decided you knew better. I decided I wanted one morning without war and death and strategy. I'm sorry if that makes me weak. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you a liability. The word hit like a slap. Clara took a step back, wrapping her arms around herself. I see. No, you don't. Adrian turned, and the frustration in his eyes was mixed with something that looked like pain. You're not a liability because you're weak or incapable. You're a liability because I care about you so much that if something happens to you, I'll burn this entire city to the ground. And my enemies know that. They're counting on it. So, yes, when you hold back information, even for a few hours, even for good reasons, it terrifies me. Because in those hours, you could be hurt or taken or killed, and I wouldn't see it coming. Clara's anger drained away, replaced by understanding. You're afraid. Of course I'm afraid. I've built my entire life on control and calculation, and you're the one variable I can't control. The one thing I'd sacrifice everything for. He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms despite her token resistance. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have called you a liability. You're the opposite. You're the reason I want to survive this, but that means I need you to trust me completely, even when it's hard. She let herself relax into his embrace, breathing in his scent. I do trust you. I just wanted to protect what we have. Keep it separate from all the darkness, just for a little while. I know, but we don't get that luxury. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He tipped her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. Promise me. No more holding back. No more deciding what I need to know. Everything. Immediately. Can you do that? Clara thought about the weight of that promise, the way it would strip away her last defenses. But she'd meant what she said last night about choosing him, choosing this. And choice meant commitment, even when it was uncomfortable. I promise. No more secrets. Good. He kissed her forehead. Now let's figure out how to turn Thursday's trap into our advantage. They spent the next hour planning, Adrian pulling up blueprints of the Fisher building on his tablet while Clara took notes. The structure was old, a relic from the city's industrial past, with multiple entry points and plenty of places for ambush. Whoever had chosen it knew what they were doing. We'll need at least a dozen men, Adrian said, marking positions on the blueprint. Snipers here and here, close protection inside, extraction team ready outside. And we sweep the building hours before, check for explosives or other surprises. What about the actual meeting with Chen? Are you really going to bring him in on this? No. Chen's just a name they chose because they know he's toxic. We'll use a double, someone who can pass for him at a distance. He glanced at her. You'll be there too. You have to be, or they'll know something's wrong. But you stay in the car with Marcus until I give the all clear. Absolutely not. Adrian's jaw tightened. Clara, if I'm not there, they'll know it's a setup. James told them I'm cooperating. They'll expect me to deliver you personally, make sure you're vulnerable. If I'm sitting in a car a block away, that defeats the entire purpose. The purpose is to draw them out, not to use you as bait. I'm already bait. I have been since James first approached me. The only question is whether we acknowledge that and use it to our advantage, or pretend I'm safe when I'm clearly not. She watched him struggle with it, watched control war with protectiveness. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. You stay by my side the entire time. No wandering off, no heroics. And you wear a vest. Deal. His phone rang again. This time it was his lawyer, Richard Chen, with news about the police investigation. Clara half listened as Adrian handled the legal strategy, her mind drifting to the larger implications. James Worthington had been murdered by his own employers. That meant whoever was behind this considered him expendable, a tool to be discarded when he'd served his purpose or become a risk. How many other tools did they have? How many other James Worthingtons were out there, working toward Adrian's destruction? And how long before she became expendable too? The thought sent ice through her veins. She'd tied herself to Adrian completely, had chosen his world and his darkness, but that world had rules, and one of them was clear. Everyone was expendable eventually, even her. Clara. Adrian was watching her, the phone call apparently finished. Where did you go just now? Just thinking about James, about how easily they killed him. He knew the risks when he signed up for this work. We all do. Do I? She met his eyes directly. I'm not like you, Adrian. I haven't spent 20 years in this world. I don't have your instincts or your experience. What happens when I make a mistake? When I become more of a risk than an asset. His expression softened. That's not going to happen. You can't know that. I can, because you're not an asset to me, Clara. You're everything. There's no calculation where you become expendable, no scenario where I choose the empire over you. If it comes down to it, I'll walk away from all of this before I let anyone hurt you. You can't walk away. You said so yourself. The only way out is death. Then I'll find a third option, but I'm not losing you. He pulled her close, his voice dropping to something fierce and certain. You're worried I'll see you the way I see everyone else in this business, as pieces on a board to be sacrificed when necessary. But you're not a piece, Clara. You're the whole damn board. You're the reason the game matters at all. Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that his feelings for her transcended the brutal pragmatism that governed his world. But she'd watched him operate for 18 months. She'd seen him sacrifice allies, betray partners, make ruthless calculations that left bodies in their wake. Love might make him want to protect her, but when it came down to survival, instinct would win. I need some air, she said, pulling away. Can I use your terrace? Of course. She stepped out onto the wraparound balcony, the city sprawling beneath her in endless concrete and glass. Up here, 42 floors above the streets, it was easy to feel separate from the chaos below, easy to pretend she was safe. But safety was an illusion. James Worthington had learned that lesson the hard way. Clara heard the door open behind her, felt Adrian's presence at her back. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Not of you, not even of dying, really. I'm scared that I've tied myself to you so completely that when this all falls apart, there'll be nothing left of me. Then we make sure it doesn't fall apart. How? By being smarter than everyone else? By always being one step ahead? Adrian, these people killed their own operative without hesitation. They're willing to burn everything to get to you. How do we fight that? The same way I've fought everything else, by being willing to burn hotter. He turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. You asked me once why I do this, why I don't just walk away. The truth is, I've never had a reason to walk away until now, but I've also never had anything worth protecting like I do now. You've changed the equation completely. That's what terrifies me. I don't want to be the reason you get yourself killed. I don't want to be the weakness they exploit. You're not a weakness. You're the first real strength I've had in 20 years. His thumbs brushed across her cheeks, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. I've survived this long by not caring about anything except survival. But that's not living, Clara. That's just existing. You've given me something to actually live for. And yes, that makes me vulnerable. But it also makes me dangerous in a whole new way, because now I have something worth fighting for beyond just pride or power. The certainty in his voice steadied her. Clara leaned into his touch, letting herself believe, if only for this moment, that they could survive what was coming. Thursday, she said. We spring their trap and turn it around on them. Thursday, he agreed. But first, we prepare. I want you to learn how to shoot. Clara blinked. What? If you're going to be in that warehouse with me, you need to be able to defend yourself. No arguments. Marcus will teach you the basics this afternoon. Adrian, I don't think learning to shoot in 3 days is going to make you an expert. No, but it might keep you alive long enough for me to get to you. His expression was implacable. This is non-negotiable. So that afternoon, Clara found herself in the private shooting range in the building's subterranean levels, Marcus patiently teaching her stance, grip, trigger discipline. The gun felt foreign in her hands, heavy and deadly, and absolutely terrifying. Don't think of it as a weapon, Marcus said, adjusting her stance. Think of it as a tool, like a hammer or a wrench. It has a job to do. Your job is to use it correctly. She fired and the recoil jarred through her arms. The target remained unmarked. Again. They practiced for 2 hours until her arms ached and her ears rang despite the protection. By the end, she could hit the target maybe 1 time in 5. Not good odds, but better than nothing. You did well, Marcus said as they cleaned the weapons. Most people freeze up their first time. You kept your head. I had a good teacher. He smiled slightly. Boss is worried about you. I've never seen him like this. Normally, he's all calculation, no emotion. But with you, it's different. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Marcus considered. Both. It makes him more human, but it also makes him more reckless. He'd tear down everything he's built to keep you safe. That kind of devotion is beautiful. It's also dangerous. Clara thought about that as she showered in Adrian's penthouse, washing away gun residue and sweat. Dangerous devotion. That described what they had perfectly. Beautiful and terrible and absolutely consuming. She found Adrian in his office, surrounded by screens and documents, planning for Thursday with military precision. He looked up when she entered, his expression softening. How was training? Humbling. I'm a terrible shot. You'll get better, and hopefully you'll never need to use it. He gestured to the screens. I've been going through James Worthington's financials. Marcus pulled his records. Interesting pattern emerged. Clara moved closer, studying the spreadsheets. What am I looking at? Payments. Regular deposits from a shell company called Meridian Holdings. Same name as the restaurant where you met him. Not a coincidence. Can you trace the company? Already did. It's buried under 6 layers of corporate entities, but I followed the trail. Guess whose name appears on the original filing documents from 5 years ago? Clara scanned the document he pulled up, and her blood ran cold. Marco Castellano. Not just Marco. Look at the other names. She did. Victor Dimitrov, Chen Wei-lin, Thomas Ferraro. Half a dozen names she recognized from Adrian's world, all powerful players in the criminal underworld. This isn't just one family trying to take you down, she said slowly. This is a coalition. They're working together. Exactly. Someone convinced them that I'm the bigger threat, that if they don't take me out, I'll eventually destroy them all. So they've put aside their own conflicts to focus on me first. Who could do that? Who has the influence to unite that many rival factions? Adrian's expression was grim. Someone with enough power and charisma to make them all listen. Someone who understands how this world works, but isn't part of any single family. Someone who's been in the background, building alliances, waiting for the right moment. Do you have a name? A suspicion? Nothing concrete yet. But if I'm right, Thursday is going to be even more dangerous than we thought. He closed the laptop, which is why you're not going. Adrian, we already discussed. That was before I knew it was a coordinated hit by multiple families. Clara, if I'm right about who's behind this, they won't just want me dead. They'll want to make a statement, and you being there gives them leverage I can't afford to give them. So what, I just sit here while you walk into a death trap? It's not a death trap if I know it's coming. And I'll have 24 men with me, all ex-military, all loyal. But I need to know you're safe. I need that certainty or I can't focus on what needs to be done. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to insist on being by his side, proving she was his equal partner, but she could see the fear beneath his control, the way his hand shook slightly when he talked about Thursday. He'd given her what she asked for, complete honesty, partnership, trust. Now he was asking for something in return. The sacrifice of her pride for his peace of mind. Okay, she said quietly. I'll stay here, but you give me updates every 30 minutes, and if something goes wrong, Marcus has orders to get you out of the city. New identity, new life, enough money to disappear completely. I'm not running. You will if I tell you to. That's the deal, Clara. You stay safe, I stay focused. We both get what we need. She knew manipulation when she heard it, knew he was using her concern for him to keep her sidelined, but she also knew he was right. Her being there would divide his attention, make him vulnerable in ways he couldn't afford. All right, but after this is done, no more sidelining. We face everything together. After this is done, we're leaving the city for a while. Maybe the country. Somewhere they can't reach us while we regroup. He pulled her close. I'm tired, Clara. Tired of fighting, tired of always looking over my shoulder. After Thursday, I want to find that third option, the one where we both survive and actually get to live. She held him tightly, feeling the exhaustion in his body, the weight of 20 years of survival finally catching up. We'll find it. Together. They spent the next 2 days in a strange, suspended reality, preparing for war while trying to pretend they were just a normal couple. Adrian worked with Marcus to finalize security protocols. Clara memorized evacuation routes and safe house locations. At night, they came together with desperate intensity, as if they could hold off Thursday's reckoning through sheer force of will. Wednesday night, Clara lay awake long after Adrian had fallen into restless sleep beside her. Tomorrow, everything would change. Either Adrian would survive the trap, and they'd have a chance at something approaching normal life, or he'd die, and she'd be left with nothing but grief and the black phone still hidden in her purse. The phone that had been silent since James's death. Almost silent. One message had come through Tuesday morning, just 2 words. Unknown, Thursday, remember, as if she could forget. Clara slipped out of bed and padded to the living room, pulling on Adrian's shirt against the night chill. The city sparkled beyond the windows, beautiful and merciless. Somewhere out there, Adrian's enemies were making their own final preparations, checking weapons, reviewing plans, counting down the hours until they could eliminate the threat he represented. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Adrian in the doorway, bare-chested and sleep-rumpled. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too many thoughts." He crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. They stood like that for a long time, watching the city breathe. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Adrian said quietly, "I want you to know something. These past weeks with you have been the best of my life. Not because of the passion or the danger or any of that. Because for the first time in 20 years, I felt like myself again. Like the person I was supposed to be before Emily died and everything went dark." Clara turned in his arms. "You're going to survive tomorrow. You're going to come back to me. And then we're going to figure out how to build something real out of all this darkness. Promise me something." "Anything. If I don't make it, if something goes wrong, don't." "Clara, listen. If I don't make it, you take the money Marcus gives you and you run. You don't try to avenge me. You don't go after whoever did it. You just live. You find someone good and normal who doesn't have blood on his hands. You have the life I can't give you." Tears burned in her eyes. "I don't want someone else. I want you. And I want you to be happy, even if that means being happy without me." He kissed her forehead. "Promise me." Clara knew it was a lie even as she said it. "I promise." They went back to bed, holding each other until dawn crept through the windows. And when Thursday morning arrived, Clara watched Adrian dress for war. Kevlar vest under custom suit, gun in shoulder holster, phone with direct line to his security team. He kissed her at the door, long and deep and desperate. "Stay safe," he murmured against her lips. "Stay here. And Clara, I love you. I need you to know that." "I love you too." She watched him leave, the door closing with a soft click that sounded like finality. Then Clara picked up the black phone and typed a message to the unknown number. "Clara, he's on his way. I did what you asked." The response came immediately. "Unknown. Good girl. Your payment will be transferred within the hour. Congratulations on making the smart choice." Clara stared at the message, her heart pounding. Then she grabbed her coat and ran for the elevator. The message she'd sent was a lie, of course. Adrian wasn't on his way to the Fisher building at all. He was heading to a secondary location 2 miles away where Marcus and his team were coordinating final preparations. The real operation wouldn't begin until 2:30, giving them time to sweep the building and position their people. But Clara needed Adrian's enemies to think their plan was working, needed them confident and distracted, because she'd figured out who was behind everything. The realization had come to her in the early hours of the morning, pieces clicking together with horrible clarity. The coalition of families, the sophisticated planning, the inside knowledge of Adrian's operations. It all pointed to someone who knew his world intimately but stood outside its traditional power structures. Someone like Richard Chen, the criminal defense attorney Adrian trusted completely. Not the Robert Chen they'd been told to meet, that had been misdirection, using a common surname to hide the real connection. But Richard Chen, who'd represented every major player in the city at some point, who had access to their secrets, their strategies, their vulnerabilities, who'd been quietly building a network while everyone focused on the obvious threats. Clara had found the proof buried in Meridian Holdings' documentation. Richard Chen's name carefully hidden, but there if you knew where to look. And once she'd seen it, everything else fell into place. The timing of James Worthington's death, coming just after Adrian had called Richard about legal representation. The too convenient discovery of the weapons shipment, the perfect knowledge of Adrian's security protocols. Richard Chen had been playing them all along. And if Clara was right, he wouldn't be at the Fisher building. He'd be somewhere safe, watching his plan unfold remotely while his hired killers did the actual work. Somewhere he could maintain plausible deniability, claim ignorance if anything went wrong. Somewhere like his office. The elevator seemed to take forever to reach the ground floor. Clara burst out into the lobby, ignoring the startled look from the security guard, and hailed a cab on the street. Her phone was already buzzing. Adrian, probably, alerted by building security that she'd left. She ignored it, typing a single message instead. Clara, trust me, I know what I'm doing. Then she turned off the phone before he could call and tell her to come back. The cab dropped her outside Chen Tower 15 minutes later. The building was modern glass and steel, housing a dozen law firms including Richard Chen's prestigious practice on the 40th floor. Clara paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk, her heart hammering. This was insane. She had no backup, no weapons except the small pistol Marcus had given her that was currently tucked in her purse. If she was wrong about Richard Chen, she'd look like a paranoid fool. If she was right, she was walking into the Viper's den alone. But someone had to stop this, and Adrian was too focused on the Fisher building to see the real threat. Clara squared her shoulders and walked into the lobby. The elevator ride to the 40th floor gave her time to second-guess every decision that had led her here. She could still turn around, could call Adrian and tell him her theory, let him handle it with his people and his resources. That would be the smart choice. But Clara was tired of being smart, tired of being protected and sidelined while men made decisions about her life. The elevator dinged open. Richard Chen's office suite was elegant in that understated way that screamed wealth. Mahogany and marble, expensive art on the walls, reception area empty at mid-afternoon. The receptionist's desk sat unmanned, a half-drunk coffee cup suggesting whoever normally sat there had stepped away. Clara moved past it, her footsteps silent on plush carpet. She could hear voices from the corner office, Richard's distinctive baritone and someone else, speaking too quietly to identify. Clara crept closer, pressing herself against the wall beside the partially open door. Should be in position by now, Richard was saying. Once Voss arrives, the snipers take him out. Clean, professional, no connection back to us. And the woman? The other voice was female, cool and controlled. The assistant? Collateral damage if she's there. If not, she's already compromised by her cooperation. Either way, she's not a threat. Claire's hands clenched into fists. So they'd never intended to pay her, never intended to honor any part of the deal. She'd been a useful idiot, nothing more. What about Castellano and the others? The woman asked. They're expecting their share of Voss's territory? They'll get it. Once Adrian's dead and his organization fractures, we'll have 6 months of chaos while everyone fights over the scraps. Perfect cover for consolidating power. By the time they realize what's happened, we'll control everything that matters. And if something goes wrong? If Voss suspects? Richard laughed, the sound cold and confident. He doesn't. I've been his trusted advisor for 5 years. He tells me everything. Every vulnerability, every secret, every fear. He's walking into that building convinced he's springing a trap, never realizing he's the prey. It's almost poetic. Clara felt sick. 5 years. Adrian had trusted this man for 5 years, and all that time Richard had been cataloging weaknesses, preparing for this moment. She pulled out her phone, her real phone, not the black one, and turned it on. Immediately it buzzed with messages from Adrian. She ignored them and opened the camera app, setting it to record, then carefully angled it around the doorframe. The timeline? The woman was asking. Voss should arrive at Fisher in 20 minutes. 5 minutes to position himself, another 5 to realize something's wrong. Then it's over. We'll hear confirmation within the hour. And you're certain your man inside hasn't been compromised. Marcus has been on my payroll for 6 months. He doesn't even know it. I've been paying his mother's medical bills through a shell charity. When I told him Voss was planning to cut her treatment, that I could help if he just provided some information, he folded immediately. Family. It's always the weak point. Clara's blood ran cold. Marcus was compromised. Adrian was walking into an ambush with a traitor at his side. She had to warn him. Had to. The floor creaked under her foot. The conversation inside stopped abruptly. Did you hear that? The woman asked. Clara ran. She made it 3 steps before the office door slammed open and someone grabbed her from behind. Strong arms wrapped around her, lifting her off her feet as she struggled. Her phone clattered to the carpet. Well, well. Richard Chen emerged from his office, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Clara's car. He was 50-ish, silver-haired, with the kind of face that inspired trust. Warm eyes, easy smile, grandfatherly charm. Except now his expression was cold as winter. Clara Hayes. I have to admit, I didn't see this coming. I thought you'd be cowering in Voss's penthouse like a good girl. Let me go. Clara twisted in her captor's grip, but the man holding her was built like a tank. She caught a glimpse of the woman from the office, tall, dark-haired, beautiful in a razor-sharp way. She looked vaguely familiar, but Clara couldn't place where she'd seen her before. I don't think so. Richard picked up Clara's phone, scrolling through the recording. His jaw tightened. Clever, but ultimately pointless. Even if you'd managed to send this to Adrian, he's already at Fisher, already walking into position. By the time he could process what it means, he'd be dead. You're wrong. Adrian's not at Fisher yet. He's too smart for that. He knew something was off about this whole setup. Richard studied her face, and Clara saw the moment doubt crept in. You're lying. Am I? Why else would I be here instead of safely tucked away? I figured out it was you. Figured out your connection to Meridian Holdings, to James Worthington, to all of it. And I know Adrian. He doesn't walk into traps blindly, no matter how confident he acts. She smiled, hoping her bluff held. Your plan is falling apart, Richard. Cut your losses and run. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across his features. Then his phone rang. He answered it, his eyes never leaving Clara. Yes? Good. And Voss? A pause. Are you certain? All right, hold position. He hung up and smiled. My people just confirmed Adrian Voss entered the Fisher building 3 minutes ago. So much for your theory that he's too smart. Though I'll give you credit for the attempt. Clara's heart sank. He was there. Despite everything, despite her warning, he'd gone to Fisher, which meant either he hadn't seen her message or he'd seen it and gone anyway, trusting his preparations were enough. Either way, he was walking into a death trap. You can still call it off, Clara said desperately. Let me talk to him. Let me warn him. You don't have to do this. Actually, I do. Adrian Voss is the last obstacle between me and complete control of this city's underground. Once he's gone, I'll be the one everyone comes to, the one who brokers every deal, settles every dispute, controls every significant operation. I've been patient for 5 years, Clara. I'm not stopping now when I'm this close. He trusted you. That's what made it so easy. Richard gestured to the man holding Clara. Take her downstairs. Basement level, storage room 3. Make sure she's secured. After this is done, we'll decide what to do with her. The woman from the office stepped forward. Richard, we should just eliminate her now. She's a loose end. She's also leverage if something does go wrong. Adrian might be willing to trade his life for hers. Keep her alive until we know for certain he's dead. Clara was dragged backward, her feet scrambling for purchase on the carpet. You won't get away with this. Adrian has people everywhere. They'll know you're responsible. Will they? I'm his lawyer, his friend. The one who'll be publicly devastated by his tragic death, who'll eulogize him beautifully and help manage his estate. No one will suspect the grieving attorney who tried so hard to protect him. Richard's smile was genuinely chilling. That's the beauty of being the one people trust. You get away with murder because no one thinks to look at you. The elevator doors closed on his smiling face. Clara's captor, a hulking man who smelled like cigarettes and violence, dragged her into the basement. The storage room was exactly what it sounded like. Concrete walls, old furniture, boxes of files. He shoved her into a chair and produced zip ties, binding her wrists behind her with efficient brutality. Nothing personal, he said in a voice like gravel. Just business. You're working for a man who's about to murder someone in cold blood. Lady, I've worked for lots of people who murder lots of people. This ain't my first rodeo. He checked the bindings, making sure they were tight enough to bite. You just sit tight. Someone will deal with you when it's over. He left, the door closing with a heavy click. Clara heard a lock engage. She was alone in a concrete box, bound to a chair, while 2 miles away, Adrian was walking into an ambush with a traitor at his side. Clara tested the zip ties, but they held firm. She tried to stand, but the chair was heavy and her wrists were positioned wrong for leverage. Panic started to creep in, cold and suffocating. Think. She needed to think. Her purse was still over her shoulder. They'd been too focused on restraining her to search her, which meant she still had the gun Marcus had given her. If she could just reach it. Clara twisted her shoulders, trying to angle the purse forward. Pain shot through her wrists as the zip ties cut deeper, but she kept going. Almost there, almost. The purse fell to the floor with a thud. She stared at it, so close and completely unreachable. Inside, the gun and both phones. Everything she needed, inches away and impossible to access. Clara closed her eyes, fighting down despair. There had to be a way. Had to be something she could do. Her eyes opened and focused on the chair leg. Metal frame, institutional furniture. If she could tip it over, maybe the impact would loosen something. Maybe she could work one hand free. It was a terrible plan, but it was the only one she had. Clara rocked her weight, building momentum. The chair tilted precariously. She rocked harder, and suddenly she was falling. The impact when she hit the concrete floor drove the breath from her lungs and sent white-hot pain through her shoulder. But the chair frame cracked. Not much. Just a hairline fracture where the back met the seat. But it was something. Clara twisted against the damaged frame, using her body weight to stress the joint. The metal groaned. Her wrists screamed as the zip ties cut deeper, blood making her hands slippery. She twisted harder, desperate, and felt the frame give another inch. Almost. She threw her weight against it one more time, and the chair back snapped free. Claire's hands were still bound, but now she had mobility. She rolled to her knees, then awkwardly to her feet, and shuffled toward her purse. Getting the gun out with her hands behind her back was awkward and frustrating, but finally she felt the weapon's grip. Now the real problem, she couldn't shoot the lock from this angle, couldn't even really see it properly. If she tried and missed, the ricochet in this concrete room could kill her. She needed her hands free. The gun had a sharp sight on the barrel. If she could hook the zip tie on it and pull... It took 5 agonizing minutes, her fingers numb and clumsy with poor circulation, but finally she felt the plastic bite start to give. She pulled harder, ignoring the pain, and the zip tie snapped. Her hands were free. Clara grabbed both phones and the gun, then moved to the door. She could hear voices outside, security guards doing their rounds, discussing the upcoming fight, oblivious to the woman locked in storage room 3. She had to get out, had to warn Adrian. But if she just started shooting, there would be more guards, more complications. She needed to be smart about this. Clara looked at the black phone, one message to Richard Chen's unknown number, one message that he'd believe came from his people. Clara. Fire at the building. Fisher operation compromised. Voss knows. Abort. 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 She sent it, then pulled up her real phone and called Adrian. It went straight to voicemail. She tried Marcus. Same thing. Of course. They'd be maintaining radio silence during the operation, phones off or on airplane mode to prevent tracking. Clara wanted to scream with frustration. She was free, armed, and completely unable to reach the people who mattered, unless she could get to Fisher herself. The building was 2 miles away, maybe 3 minutes by car if traffic cooperated. She had a gun in desperation and absolutely no idea if she'd arrive in time. But she had to try. Clara pressed her ear to the door, listening for the guards. She could hear them, maybe 20 feet away, still talking. When their voices receded slightly, she raised the gun and fired twice at the lock. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The lock shattered, and Clara kicked the door open, already running. 2 security guards spun toward her, hands going for weapons. Clara didn't hesitate. She fired 3 shots, one into the ceiling between them, the other 2 into the concrete at their feet. Not trying to hit them, just shock them into hesitation. It worked. They dove for cover, and Clara was already past them, hitting the stairs at a dead run. She burst into the lobby and straight into chaos. The gunshots had triggered alarms. People were screaming, running for exits. Clara ran with them, just another terrified person fleeing violence. Outside, she grabbed a taxi that had stopped at a red light, yanking open the door and throwing herself inside. Fisher Building, Warehouse District. $50 if you get me there in 3 minutes. The driver's eyes widened at the gun still in her hand. Lady, I don't want trouble. Clara pulled out a $100 bill and shoved it through the divider. Please, someone's going to die if I don't get there in time. Please. Maybe it was the desperation in her voice. Maybe it was the money. The driver hit the gas. They flew through the city, running red lights and weaving through traffic with reckless abandon. Clara tried Adrian's phone again. Still nothing. Marcus's phone. Nothing. The black phone buzzed. Unknown. What fire? What are you talking about? So Richard had gotten her fake message. Good. That meant confusion, hesitation, maybe enough to delay the execution. Clara, someone called it in. Cops on the way. Get your people out. The response was immediate. Unknown. Stay where you are. I'm sending someone to verify. Clara smiled grimly. Let him send someone. Let him waste time and resources checking on a phantom fire. Every second of delay was a second Adrian might survive. The taxi screeched to a stop 3 blocks from the Fisher building, close enough that Clara could see the structure looming against the sky, all rust and broken windows. Far enough that they wouldn't be caught in whatever was about to happen. She threw another 100 at the driver and ran. The building rose before her like a tomb, 5 stories of industrial decay. Every window either broken or missing entirely. Clara could see movement in some of the upper windows. Snipers, probably, waiting for their shot. Where was Adrian? She spotted the black SUV parked behind a dumpster, Marcus's vehicle, which meant they were here, inside, walking into position, walking into death. Clara approached from the east side, staying low, using abandoned equipment for cover. She could hear voices now, muffled but distinct. Male voices, coordinated communication. Target on sight, 2nd floor, northeast corner. Wait for confirmation before engaging. Adrian's people, which meant he was inside. She had to reach him, had to warn him about Marcus, about Richard, about the coalition. Clara found a side entrance, a door hanging crooked on broken hinges. She slipped inside, gun raised, every sense screaming alert. The interior was worse than the exterior. Graffiti-covered walls, debris everywhere. The smell of rust and decay. Light filtered through broken windows and dusty shafts. Voices echoed from above. She recognized Adrian's deep baritone, though she couldn't make out words. He was alive. Still alive. Clara started up the stairs, each step careful and deliberate. No point in surviving Richard Chen's basement only to die from a stray bullet here. The 2nd floor was a maze of collapsed walls and empty rooms. She followed the voices, her heart hammering so loud she was sure someone would hear it. And then she saw them. Adrian stood in what had once been a main office space, Marcus beside him, 2 other men positioned at the windows. They were studying blueprints, discussing positions, completely focused on the ambush they thought they were setting. Clara stepped into the doorway, gun raised. Marcus is working for Richard Chen. 4 heads whipped toward her. Adrian's expression went from shock to fury in half a second. Clara, what the hell? Richard Chen is behind everything. The coalition, the setup, all of it. He's been paying Marcus's mother's medical bills through a shell charity and using it to manipulate him. Marcus has been feeding him information for 6 months. Marcus went pale. That's insane. Boss, I would never— Your mother, Clara said, her gun never wavering from Marcus's chest. St. Catherine's Hospital, cancer treatment. Bills paid by the Meridian Foundation. Check your records, Adrian. Check the Foundation's board members. Richard Chen is listed as treasurer. Adrian pulled out his phone, his movement sharp with controlled violence. A few taps, a few tense seconds of scrolling. His face went very still. Marcus, put your weapon on the floor, slowly. Boss, I don't know what she's talking about. The foundation has been paying $70,000 a month to St. Catherine's. Your mother's name is on every invoice. Now put the gun down before I put you down. Marcus's hand trembled as he lowered his weapon to the concrete. I didn't know. I swear. I didn't know where the money was coming from. A caseworker approached me 6 months ago, said there was a charitable foundation that wanted to help families with medical expenses. I filled out paperwork, and the bills started getting paid. I never connected it to Chen. But he asked you for information, Clara said. Small things at first, just harmless details about Adrian's schedule, his habits. And you gave it to him because you were grateful, because you didn't want to risk losing that support. Tears were running down Marcus's face now. I thought it was just background checks, routine verification for the foundation's records. I never meant to. He looked at Adrian. Boss, you have to believe me. I would never deliberately hurt you. And yet, here we are. Adrian's voice was ice. Trapped in a building that's about to become a killing floor because you were too stupid or too desperate to question where $60,000 a month was coming from. One of the other men spoke up. Boss, we need to move. If Chen knows we're here, The window behind him exploded in a shower of glass. The man went down, blood spreading across his chest. Before anyone could react, 2 more windows shattered. Bullets chewed into concrete, sending chips flying. Adrian dove for cover, pulling Clara with him behind a concrete support pillar. "Snipers!" someone shouted. "Multiple positions, all sides!" The trap had been sprung. Adrian's remaining men returned fire, but they were pinned down, caught in a crossfire from 3 directions. Clara pressed herself against the pillar, her heart racing. This was it. This was how they died, trapped like rats while Richard Chen's snipers picked them off one by one. "We need an exit," Adrian said into his radio, his voice preternaturally calm despite the bullets tearing through the air around them. "South stairwell now, fighting retreat, covering fire." Marcus was crouched behind a desk, his own weapon drawn despite having betrayed them. "Boss, let me help. Let me make this right." "You've done enough. Please. My mother, if I die here, she'll have no one. Let me do one good thing before this is over." Adrian looked at him with an expression Clara couldn't read. Then he nodded curtly. "You want redemption? Cover our retreat. Keep them busy while we get to the stairs." "Done." Marcus rose, firing toward the windows with methodical precision. "Go, I've got this!" Adrian grabbed Clara's hand and ran. They made it to the stairwell as bullets chewed through the door frame behind them. Behind them, Marcus was shouting, firing, buying them seconds with his life. The stairs down were chaos, darkness and debris, and the constant thunder of gunfire above. Adrian moved with absolute certainty, pulling Clara after him, his grip on her hand the only solid thing in a world gone mad. They burst out a ground-floor exit and into blinding daylight. A vehicle was waiting, one of Adrian's backup teams, engine running. They threw themselves inside, and the driver hit the gas before the doors were even closed. Only when they were 3 blocks away, sirens wailing in the distance, did Adrian finally let go of Clara's hand. "You directly disobeyed my orders. I saved your life. You could have been killed. So could you, and I wasn't about to sit in your penthouse while Richard Chen murdered you." Clara turned to face him. "I know you're angry. I know I should have stayed put, but I also know I did the right thing." Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Don't ever do that again," he said into her hair. "Don't ever make me think I've lost you." "Then don't leave me behind." He pulled back just enough to kiss her, fierce and desperate and alive. When they broke apart, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Richard Chen is a dead man. He's also probably running right now. The moment the shooting started, he would have known something went wrong. Then we find him before he gets far." Adrian pulled out his phone. "I have people in every airport, every train station, every border crossing. He won't make it out of the city." The driver spoke up. "Boss, we've got a problem. Marcus didn't make it out." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Confirmed?" He held them off long enough for the backup team to extract, then took 3 rounds to the chest. EMTs called it on scene. Silence filled the vehicle. Marcus had been a traitor, yes. Had been manipulated, had given information that nearly got them all killed. But he'd also died buying them time to escape. "His mother," Claire said quietly. "Someone needs to make sure she's taken care of." Adrian nodded slowly. "I'll handle it. It's the least I owe him." They drove in silence for a while, the adrenaline slowly draining away to leave exhaustion and the reality of what had just happened. Clara's hands were shaking. Her shoulder throbbed where she'd hit the concrete earlier. Everything felt surreal, like a dream she couldn't quite wake from. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere I can regroup and plan our next move." Adrian's expression was grim. "This isn't over. Chen tried to kill me and failed. That means war. Between now and when I put a bullet in his brain, he's going to throw everything he has at us. Then we need to be smarter than him. We will be. Because unlike Richard, I don't underestimate my enemies, and I don't underestimate you." He looked at her with something like awe. "You figured it out. Figured out the one person I'd never suspect. How?" "Process of elimination. The coalition required someone with connections to all the families but loyalty to none. Someone with inside knowledge of your operations. Someone you'd never see coming because you trusted them completely." Clara managed a tired smile. "Plus I found his name in Meridian Holdings' corporate filings. That helped." Remind me never to bet against you. Deal. But the car pulled into an underground garage, security gates closing behind them with solid thunks. They were in one of Adrian's safe houses, Clara realized, a building he owned under a shell company, maintained for exactly this kind of emergency. Inside, it was Spartan but functional. Weapons cache, communication equipment, supplies for a long siege if necessary. Adrian immediately went to the computers, pulling up feeds and databases. I need to know where Chen is, need to know what resources he has left, who might shelter him. Clara sank into a chair, exhaustion crashing over her. Her phone buzzed. The black one. She pulled it out, already knowing what she'd find. Unknown. You betrayed us. That was a mistake. One you won't live to regret. She showed it to Adrian. He read it without expression, then calmly took the phone and destroyed it under his heel. Let them come. I'll be ready. And looking at him in that moment, blood on his suit, fury in his eyes, absolute certainty in his bearing, Clara believed him. Richard Chen had made a terrible miscalculation. He'd tried to kill Adrian Voss and failed, had underestimated Clara's determination and Marcus's final loyalty. Now he was a wounded animal being hunted by something far more dangerous. The question wasn't whether Adrian would find him. The question was how much of the city would burn before he did. Richard Chen was found 36 hours later in a warehouse on the east side, trying to board a cargo ship bound for Shanghai. Adrian's people had tracked him through his mistress, the dark-haired woman from his office, who'd turned out to be far less loyal than Richard had believed when presented with photographic evidence of his other 3 mistresses and a numbered account in the Caymans. Adrian didn't tell Clara the details of what happened in that warehouse. He left at midnight with 6 men and returned at dawn with blood on his knuckles and something cold and final in his eyes. All he said was that Richard Chen would never threaten them again, and the way he said it left no room for questions. Clara didn't ask. Some things were better left in the darkness where they belonged. What she did ask about was the aftermath, the coalition of families that had united against Adrian, now leaderless and fractured. Marco Castellano had been found dead in his car 2 days after the Fisher Building ambush, 3 bullets in his chest, no witnesses. Viktor Dimitrov had fled to Moscow. The others had gone to ground or sworn renewed loyalty to Adrian with the kind of desperation that came from knowing they'd backed the wrong horse. They're terrified, Adrian told her over breakfast a week later. They were still in the safe house, though it had started to feel less like a bunker and more like a home. Every single one of them is waiting for me to come for revenge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And will you, Clara asked, pouring coffee into both their mugs, go after them? Some of them, the ones who were true believers in Richard's plan, who actively worked to kill me. Those I'll handle. His eyes met hers over the rim of his cup. But the others, the ones who were coerced or manipulated or just made bad bets, those I can use. Fear is a powerful motivator. They'll be more loyal now than they ever were before. That's cold. That's survival. But he reached across the table, taking her hand. I'm not going to pretend I'm something I'm not, Clara. I'm still the same man who runs a criminal empire. Still the man who solves problems with violence when necessary. Richard's death doesn't change that. I know. And she did. Clara had made her choice weeks ago, had walked into this world with open eyes. I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm just asking if there's room in that world for something besides revenge and power. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. There is now. Because of you. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Clara squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses there, the evidence of violence barely contained beneath expensive suits and civilized veneer. This was her life now. This darkness, this danger, this complicated man who looked at her like she was the only light in his universe. She'd never been happier. The next challenge came from an unexpected quarter. Adrian's legitimate businesses, the ones that provided cover for his criminal enterprises, were facing federal scrutiny. Someone had tipped off the Securities and Exchange Commission about irregularities in several of his shell companies. The investigation was preliminary, but it had teeth. It's Richard's final revenge, Adrian said, reviewing documents in what had become their war room. He must have filed complaints before we caught up with him, salted evidence in places he knew investigators would look. Even dead, he's still causing problems. Clara studied the paperwork, her mind working through implications. Can they connect anything back to the illegal operations? Not directly. I've been careful to keep everything separate, but they can make life difficult. Freeze assets, subpoena records, tie everything up in legal knots for years. He rubbed his eyes, exhaustion showing through. I'm tired of fighting, Clara. Tired of always looking over my shoulder, always waiting for the next threat. Then stop. He looked at her sharply. What? Stop fighting, or at least stop fighting this way. Clara moved to sit beside him, taking the documents from his hands. You said you wanted a third option, something besides death or endless war. What if this investigation is actually an opportunity? I'm listening. You've spent 20 years building legitimate businesses as cover for criminal operations. What if you flip that? What if you use the criminal connections to build something actually legitimate, something sustainable? Adrian laughed, but it was bitter. You want me to go straight? Clara, I've got blood on my hands. Literal blood. You can't just wash that away with good intentions. I'm not talking about washing anything away. I'm talking about evolution, about using the power and connections you have to build something that doesn't require you to kill or be killed. She pulled up a file on the computer. Look at your legitimate holdings, tech investments, real estate, venture capital. They're actually profitable. In some cases, more profitable than the criminal operations. What if you divested from the illegal side? Sold off territory to people who want it, used the proceeds to expand the legal businesses? The families would never allow it. They'd see it as weakness. They saw Richard Chen's coalition as strength, and look how that turned out. You've just demonstrated that you're the most dangerous man in this city. You killed or scattered everyone who came against you. Now you negotiate from a position of absolute power. Tell them you're restructuring. Offer them territory they've wanted for years. Make it worth their while to let you walk away. Adrian stared at her like she'd suggested flying to the moon. That's insane. Is it? Or is it the smartest play on the board? Clara warmed to her argument. Think about it. The federal investigation gives you cover. You can claim you're being forced to divest, that you're cleaning up your operations to avoid prosecution. The families get what they want. More territory, less competition. You get what you want. A way out that doesn't end in death. Everyone wins. Except I'd be giving up everything I've built. No, you'd be giving up the parts that are trying to kill you. The parts that mean you can't sleep at night, that mean every restaurant is a potential ambush, and every ally is a potential traitor. You'd be keeping the empire, Adrian, just changing what it's built on. He stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the city. Clara let him think, knowing this was too big a decision to rush. She'd planted the seed. Now she had to trust that the man she loved was smart enough to see the opportunity. Finally, he turned back to her. If I do this, and that's a big if, I'd need help. Someone I trust absolutely to manage the transition, to negotiate with the families, to make sure I don't get stabbed in the back while I'm vulnerable. You have me. You're not equipped for this. These are dangerous people, Clara. Negotiating with them requires experience, requires understanding their psychology. Then teach me. She stood, crossing to him. You said I was your partner, your equal. Prove it. Stop protecting me from your world and let me help you navigate it. I've already proven I can handle myself. I figured out Richard when you couldn't. I saved your life at Fisher. I'm not some fragile thing that needs sheltering. Adrian cupped her face in his hands, his gray eyes searching hers. You're asking me to let you walk into the fire. I'm asking you to let me walk beside you. There's a difference. He kissed her then, deep and slow and full of promise. When they broke apart, he was smiling, a real smile, not the calculated expressions he wore for business. All right, we do this together, but we do it smart, carefully. One family at a time, one negotiation at a time. And the first sign things are going south, we have an exit strategy ready. Deal. The next 3 months were a masterclass in criminal diplomacy. Clara sat in on meetings with men who'd ordered murders over dinner disagreements. She learned to read micro-expressions, to hear what wasn't being said, to identify leverage and weakness. Adrian taught her the language of his world, the careful euphemisms, the unspoken rules, the delicate balance between respect and fear. She was good at it, better than good. Clara discovered she had a talent for negotiation, for finding solutions that made everyone feel like they'd won, even when Adrian was getting exactly what he wanted. The families started asking for her specifically, trusting her to broker deals that Adrian might have approached too aggressively. "You're a natural," Adrian told her after a particularly successful meeting with the Dimitrov family. Victor had returned from Moscow once word spread that Adrian was divesting, smelling opportunity. Clara had negotiated a deal that gave the Dimitrovs control of the port operations in exchange for them dropping all outstanding grudges and recognizing Adrian's legitimate businesses as off-limits. "I had a good teacher. I taught you tactics. The instinct is all yours." He pulled her close as they walked to the car. "You're building something here, Clara. Respect, reputation. People are starting to see you as more than just my assistant or my woman. They see you as a power in your own right." The words sent a thrill through her, not because she craved power for its own sake, but because it meant she was truly his equal now, not just in private, not just in his bed, but in the world that mattered to him. 6 months after Richard Chen's death, Adrian called a meeting of every major family in the city. Clara helped arrange it. Neutral ground, strict security protocols, assurances of safe passage. Every player who mattered showed up, curiosity overcoming caution. Adrian stood before them in a private room at the Grandview Hotel and made his announcement. "I'm out. Effective immediately, I'm divesting from all criminal operations. Territory, businesses, connections, everything is on the table. I'm offering each of you the opportunity to buy into what I've built, to expand your own operations with infrastructure that's already established and profitable." The room erupted. Questions, accusations, demands for explanation. Clara watched Adrian handle it with practiced ease, deflecting challenges, answering concerns, maintaining control of the room through sheer force of personality. Marco Castellano's nephew, now running the family, stood up. "This is weakness. You're running scared from the feds." "I'm making a strategic choice," Adrian corrected calmly. "The federal investigation is real, and it's not going away. I can fight it and spend years tied up in legal battles, or I can adapt. I'm choosing adaptation. If you see that as weakness, you're welcome to test it. But I'd remind you what happened to the last people who made that mistake." The room went quiet. Everyone remembered Richard Chen, remembered the coalition, remembered how thoroughly Adrian had crushed them. "So what do you want from us?" Viktor Dimitrov asked. "I want clean exits from all joint operations. I want guarantees that my legitimate businesses remain untouchable. And I want acknowledgement that this city has room for both criminal enterprises and legal ones without them having to be at war." Adrian paused. "In exchange, you get territory you've wanted for years. You get my established networks. You get my people, the ones who want to stay in this life. It's the deal of a lifetime, gentlemen. I suggest you take it." They negotiated for 6 hours. Clara sat beside Adrian the entire time, taking notes, offering suggestions, helping smooth over rough patches when tempers flared. By the time they emerged, agreements had been struck with every major family. Adrian would spend the next year executing the transition, but the framework was in place. He was getting out. They celebrated that night in Adrian's penthouse, back home after months in safe houses and temporary locations. The city spread out beneath them, beautiful and deadly, and finally, blessedly neutral. "I can't believe you actually did it," Clara said, champagne glass in hand. "You found the third option." "We found it," Adrian corrected. "I would never have seen the path if you hadn't shown it to me. I was too deep in the old ways, too convinced that violence was the only language that mattered. It's still going to be dangerous. The transition, the adjustment period, some people won't honor the agreements. Then we'll handle them, together." He set down his glass and reached into his pocket. "Which brings me to something I've been meaning to ask." Clara's heart stuttered as he pulled out a small velvet box. "Don't panic," he said with a slight smile. "I'm not getting down on one knee. We're past the point where I need to convince you with grand gestures. This is just the logical next step in a partnership that's already proven itself." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, platinum, with a single perfect diamond that caught the light and threw rainbows across the ceiling. "Marry me, Clara. Not because I need you, though I do. Not because you've saved my life, though you have. Marry me because you're the only person I've ever met who sees exactly what I am and chooses me anyway. Because you made me want to be something more than just a survivor. Because I love you in ways I didn't know were possible. Clara took the ring from the box, studying it. Simple, elegant, perfect. Like everything else about Adrian when you stripped away the violence and darkness. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. The marriage, the partnership, the life we're building. Yes to you, exactly as you are. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. Adrian never did anything without careful planning. They made love that night with the city lights streaming through the windows, and it felt different than all the times before. Not just passion or possession or desperate need. This was covenant. This was two people binding themselves together with full knowledge of the cost and choosing to pay it anyway. The year that followed was controlled chaos. Adrian systematically divested from criminal operations while expanding his legitimate empire. Clara became his official partner, her name appearing on corporate documents and business cards. They hired the best lawyers, the best accountants, the best PR people money could buy to manage the transition and present a united front to federal investigators. The SEC investigation concluded with fines and minor sanctions, embarrassing but not crippling. Adrian paid them without complaint and used the publicity to reinvent himself as a reformed businessman, someone who'd made mistakes but was committed to doing things right going forward. It was brilliant, really. The criminal families got their territory, the feds got their pound of flesh, and Adrian got his freedom. There were still threats, of course. A few diehards who saw Adrian's exit as betrayal tried to make examples. They learned quickly that Adrian Voss out of the criminal business was still Adrian Voss, still dangerous, still connected, still absolutely willing to protect what was his. The last serious attempt came 9 months into the transition. A crew from out of state, thinking Adrian had gone soft, tried to kidnap Clara as she left a business meeting. They made it 3 blocks before Adrian's security team intercepted them. Clara never learned exactly what happened to those men, and she didn't ask. After that, the message was clear. Adrian might be going legitimate, but he was still untouchable, and so was his wife. They married on a Saturday in December, in a small ceremony attended by the handful of people they actually trusted. No families, no spectacle, just a judge and witnesses and vows that meant everything because they were given freely. Clara wore white, not because she was innocent, but because she was choosing to be. Choosing to step into this new life with Adrian unburdened by the darkness they'd waded through to get here. When the judge pronounced them married, Adrian kissed her like a drowning man finding air. And in that moment, Clara knew they'd won. Against Richard Chen's conspiracy, against federal investigators, against the entire criminal underworld that wanted them dead or destroyed. They'd survived. More than that, they'd built something real from the ashes. The reception was small and perfect, held in Adrian's penthouse with the city as their witness. One of Adrian's oldest associates, a man named David who'd been with him since the beginning, made a toast. To Adrian and Clara, may they have the wisdom to know when to fight and when to walk away. And may they never forget that the greatest victory is surviving long enough to enjoy it. They drank to that. Later, when the guests had gone and they were alone, Clara stood at the window in her wedding dress, looking out at the city that had tried so hard to destroy them. "Do you regret it?" Adrian asked, coming up behind her. "Any of it? The danger? The choices you made? The lines you crossed?" Clara thought about the woman she'd been 18 months ago. Careful, safe, going through the motions of a life that never quite fit. Then she thought about who she was now, Adrian's partner, his equal, someone who'd negotiated with killers and survived assassination attempts and helped reshape the criminal landscape of an entire city. "Not even a little bit," she said honestly. "You? Only that I didn't find you sooner, that I wasted so many years being just a survivor instead of actually living." She turned in his arms, the diamond on her finger catching the light. "We have time now, all the time in the world. Then let's not waste it." They made plans that night, real plans, not just survival strategies. They would travel, places Adrian had never been because he was always too busy maintaining his empire. They would build the legitimate businesses into something sustainable, something that could last beyond just them. They would find ways to give back, to balance the scales for all the darkness they'd been part of. And they would do it together. 6 months after the wedding, Adrian's divestment was complete. He officially owned nothing illegal, controlled no criminal territory, had no outstanding debts or obligations to the families. He was, by any measure, out. The transition hadn't been bloodless. 3 people had died in disputes over territory. 2 assassination attempts on Adrian had been thwarted. Clara had received enough death threats to fill a filing cabinet, but they'd survived, and that was what mattered. On the anniversary of the day Clara had walked into Meridian Restaurant to meet James Worthington, they stood together on the terrace of their home, no longer a penthouse fortress, but an actual house in the suburbs with a yard and neighbors and everything normal people had. "A year ago, I thought we were both dead," Clara said, sipping wine and watching the sunset. "Richard's trap should have killed us. The coalition should have destroyed you. The feds should have buried us both. But they didn't, because we were smarter, faster, and more willing to adapt than anyone expected." Adrian pulled her close. "You know what the best part is? I don't miss it, any of it. The power, the fear, the constant warfare. I thought I'd feel diminished without it. Instead, I just feel free. That's because you replaced it with something better. With you. With us," Clara corrected. "With a partnership that's based on choice instead of necessity. With a life we actually want instead of one we're forced into." They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. In the distance, they could see the city's towers rising like monuments to ambition and greed. Adrian had ruled that city once, had been its dark king. Now he was just a man, standing with his wife, planning a future that didn't involve violence or death. It should have felt like defeat. Instead, it felt like victory. 3 years later, Clara stood in the boardroom of Voss Enterprises presenting quarterly results to the board of directors. The company had tripled in value since Adrian's restructuring, their tech investments paying off beyond anyone's projections. They'd diversified into green energy, medical technology, and educational platforms. The company that had once been a front for criminal operations was now a legitimate powerhouse. Adrian sat at the head of the table, watching her present with undisguised pride. He'd stepped back from day-to-day operations, trusting Clara to run the business side, while he focused on strategic planning and long-term vision. It was a partnership that worked beautifully, each playing to their strengths. When the meeting ended and the board members filed out, Adrian stayed behind. "You were brilliant," he said. "They're afraid of you." "Good. Fear equals respect in this world. You taught me that. I taught you a lot of things. You've surpassed me in most of them." He stood, moving around the table to her. "I have a surprise for you." "Oh?" He pulled out his phone, showing her a photograph. A beautiful estate in the French countryside, all stone walls and vineyard views. "I bought it. Thought we could use a place to escape to. Somewhere we can just be us, without business or obligations or anything except each other." Clara looked at the photo, then at her husband. In 3 years of marriage, they'd built something extraordinary. Not just a business empire, but a life. They'd traveled the world, started a foundation to help families with medical expenses. Marcus's mother had been their first recipient, though she'd never known the connection to her son's death. They'd learned to live without looking over their shoulders constantly, though old habits died hard. And through it all, they'd stayed together, partners, equals. 2 people who'd chosen each other in the darkness and refused to let go even when the light came. "It's perfect," Clara said. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow, if you want. The board can handle things for a few weeks. We deserve a vacation." They flew to France the next day, leaving behind the city that had forged them in fire. The estate was even more beautiful in person, with gardens and a small vineyard and views that stretched for miles. They spent 3 weeks there, doing nothing but enjoying each other and the peace they'd fought so hard to achieve. On their last night, they sat on the terrace watching stars emerge in an unpolluted sky. "I never thought I'd have this," Adrian said quietly. "Peace. Happiness. A future that doesn't end in violence. You have it because you fought for it, because you were brave enough to walk away when walking away meant admitting you wanted something more than just survival. I have it because of you, because you showed me there was another way." He took her hand, the wedding ring catching starlight. "Thank you, Clara, for everything. For saving my life, for becoming my partner, for refusing to give up on me even when I'd given up on myself. Thank you for letting me in, for trusting me with your darkness and your light, For being exactly who you are without apology. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. We did it, Adrian. We got the happy ending no one thought was possible. Is it an ending? Feels more like a beginning to me. She smiled. Then let's see where this beginning takes us. Years passed. The business continued to thrive. They had a daughter, Emily, named for Adrian's sister, who grew up knowing her father as a businessman and philanthropist, not the man he'd been before. They never hid the truth from her, but they framed it as the past, as lessons learned, as the foundation that had brought them to where they were. Clara sometimes thought about those early days. The fear, the danger, the desperate gambles that could have ended so differently. She thought about James Worthington and Richard Chen, about Marcus's sacrifice and the coalition that had united to destroy them. She thought about the woman she'd been, careful, controlled, living half a life because she was too afraid to reach for more. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, more complete. Someone who'd walked through fire and emerged not burned, but tempered. Someone who'd chosen love and danger and life in all its messy, complicated glory. On the 10th anniversary of the night she'd met Adrian for the first time, the night she'd stood in his office and refused to be intimidated, they returned to the penthouse. It was a hotel now, the space renovated and repurposed. But they'd kept one room exactly as it had been, Adrian's old office. They stood there together, looking out at the city they'd conquered and then walked away from. Do you ever miss it? Clara asked. The power, the control, the feeling of ruling this city? Adrian considered the question seriously. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I remember what it felt like to be untouchable, to have that kind of influence. He turned to her. But then I wake up next to you, or I watch our daughter laugh, or I review the legitimate good we're doing through the foundation, and I realize what I have now is so much better than what I had then. I was powerful before, but I'm happy now. And I'll take happiness over power any day. Even if it means being ordinary, we're not ordinary, Clara. We never will be. We're just choosing to use our extraordinary in different ways. She kissed him there in that office where it had all begun, where she'd first felt the pull between them, where everything had started to shift. It felt like closing a circle, like honoring what they'd been while celebrating what they'd become. When they left that night, walking hand in hand through the city that had tried to destroy them, Clara felt nothing but gratitude for the danger that had brought them together, for the darkness that had shown them how to appreciate the light, for every terrible choice and desperate gamble that had led them here. They'd rewritten the rules. They'd refused to accept that people like them couldn't have happy endings. They'd fought and sacrificed and adapted and survived. And in the end, they'd won not through violence or power, but through partnership. Through two people refusing to let the world tell them who they had to be, choosing instead to define themselves on their own terms. The city lights glittered around them as they drove home, not to a fortress or a safe house, but to a home filled with laughter and love and the life they'd built together. Adrian's hand rested on Clara's knee, comfortable and certain. She covered it with her own, feeling the wedding ring beneath her palm. They'd escaped the darkness, not by running from it, but by transforming it into something new, something beautiful, something that looked remarkably like redemption. And as they pulled into their driveway, their daughter's light visible in the upstairs window, Clara thought about the younger version of herself who'd been so afraid of taking risks, who'd played it safe and stayed small and never reached for what she really wanted. That Clara would never have believed this ending was possible. But the Clara she'd become, the one forged in fire and tempered by love, knew better. She knew that happy endings weren't given. They were fought for, bled for, built brick by people brave enough to reach for them. They were the reward for refusing to accept that darkness had to win, that power corrupted absolutely, that people couldn't change. Adrian Voss had been a monster once, a criminal, a killer, a man who'd done terrible things for terrible reasons. But he'd also been capable of love, of change, of choosing something better when given the chance. And Clara Hayes had been the one to give him that chance. Not because she was naive or foolish, but because she'd seen beneath the monster to the man underneath. Because she'd been brave enough to love him anyway. Together, they'd proven that even the darkest stories could have light in them. That redemption was possible for those willing to fight for it. That love, real, complicated, messy love, could survive anything. Even a crime boss and his defiant assistant. They walked into their home together, leaving the city and its memories behind. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chapters in the story they were writing together. But tonight, they were just Adrian and Clara, husband and wife, partners, survivors, home.